Greetings, friends. I found a cool place to film a video. Let's go on a little walk here. Here's the right way. Getting mixed up here. So these flowers are coming out here. They're all over the place. I want to talk to you today about the importance of having a town square. So what do I mean by town square? I mean a central area in the town or the city where people can meet and people can gather. This is something I noticed in Latin America. It was very common. It was part of the way the Spanish built their cities and their towns. They called it the Plaza de Armas. The translation would be the main square, but literally it means the place of arms or weapons. The same way arms can mean weapon in English. So presumably that's because the militia would gather in the Plaza de Armas in the event of a military review or in the event of a crisis. That's what I'm assuming, because it makes sense. Now, in the Plaza de Armas, there's usually going to be the cathedral or the main church of the town, and then maybe the courthouse, and basically the most important buildings, or some of the most important buildings, are going to be ringing the town square. And literally a square, it doesn't always have to be a square, but that's normally how it was. And you would expect to find good architecture here. You'd expect to find the plaza itself to be designed with a high level of finesse and style. So you might find trees. Often in the Spanish and the Latin case, it's mostly cobblestone or stone. They don't like to have quite the amount of trees and green space that historically Anglo people might like. But it's the same idea. You might have some nice trees. You probably have fountains, statues. Just stones carved in a certain way. It doesn't even have to be representing something, but stylized enough to give it a sense of high culture, which is what we're missing in our day. We have no sense of culture at all, let alone high culture. And this is something which enriches life. It elevates man's being, man's consciousness, to be aware of a greater order in the universe, which ultimately stems from God. Now, I've been getting my dose of the town square in Toronto, despite all the odds at Yonge and Dundas Square previously, and now again at Queen's Park. Queen's Park isn't technically a square, but it's the same idea repeating itself. You have a good architectural setting. In Queen's Park, you have a lot more trees. Yonge and Dundas Square, that's horrific, that's ugly, but still, despite the ugliness, the same idea coming together, which is that people come together, especially men come together, and they debate important topics. Maybe not necessarily important topics, but people come together, they gather. What they talk about in ancient Greece, like Socrates and the people debating and in public, right? This is where you get the real best debates. There were some town squares in older American, presumably Canadian cities as well, but that model did not stick, and they have since been overwhelmed by just the modern city where there are no town squares. The modern idea is to treat a city as a composition of functional units where your only real purpose is to work and eat and sleep. There's no higher unity. What the town square should represent ideally is an organic, almost artistic level to the human community. Maybe I'm using big words unnecessarily there, but I'm trying to say that town square shows you that life is not just about eating and sleeping. It's not just about leisure, it's about an organic unity, a deeper sense of meaning. And we get that from architecture, from blending with nature, and most importantly with people gathering, people coming together, whether it's some kids kicking a soccer ball around in some Latin American city, or a nice statue of King Edward VII in Queen's Park, Toronto. Those are important aspects, but most importantly, the people coming together freely and often debating, often the men having important debates. This is what I would like to think would be an aspect of our Western history. The town square has a strange power. It anchors the town. It gives the town a center point. Now, in the big cities, we've lost that, and it would be a place for not just statues, but memorials, benches, planters. And what would the cathedral do? The cathedral would perform the same function as the castle, or maybe some other statue or great work of architecture. It's basically meant to give the whole town a sense of dignity. I suppose you can have some commercial activity in the town square, but it should be apart from the market. Historically, I mean, we don't have this anymore, but in the older model of towns, there would be a market, and that's where all the dirtiness and filth would be. I'm not saying that markets are bad in themselves, but you'd want to remove that from the town square. You might have some vendors in the town square, but you keep it under control, because this is a place for high culture. It should be separate from the market. The city square is significant in that it shows us that there's no exact, obvious reason to have it. That's what makes it so great. Maybe you just want to people watch. Maybe you just want to hang out. Maybe you just want to soak in the atmosphere of the town. But there is something real to the atmosphere of a town. There is something real to people watching. That's where these modernists, these functionalists, whatever you want to call them, that's where they can't understand what this is all about. So the town square reminds us that cities need not be degenerate places. They often are degenerate places, but it should not necessarily be the case that man was meant to be out in the countryside all the time. I think there's good things about the countryside, and we hear a lot in our time about the need to flee to the countryside, and that may be sensible because the cities are going to become more and more difficult places to live. But let's just keep in mind, if we want to strive for a high form of culture at some point in the future, when after Western civilization has already collapsed and we want to rebuild, cities are going to be necessary, because you can't have an elevation of your intellectual life without meeting people in person. I mean, sure, you can go on YouTube and all the time, but that's a historical pattern. Men coming together, other people too, but especially intellectual men. So cities need not be degenerate places. They actually serve an important role in elevating the human spirit. This is the way it's always been, going back into history. Hasta luego, amigos.